Walmart, bright lights, endless aisles. Families shopping at midnight like it's the safest place in the world. But what if I told you that behind those automatic sliding doors, some of the darkest and most disturbing things have happened? Things most people will never believe until they experience them themselves. Tonight, you're going to hear 10 stories that prove Walmart isn't just a place for groceries. Sometimes it's a place you never walk out of the same again. These are the 10 most disturbing Walmart horror stories. Before we dive in, I want to know something from you. Right now, which city are you watching this video from? Drop the name of your city in the comments. I'm really curious how far these stories travel and from where the bravest people are watching. Because after tonight, your city might never feel the same again. Now, let's begin. They say the scariest places aren't haunted houses or abandoned asylums. They're the places you walk into every day, thinking they're ordinary. Walmart, with its bright lights and endless aisles, feels safe. But for the people who work the graveyard shift, when the doors are locked and the customers are gone, the store changes. The silence is too heavy. The buzzing of the fluorescent lights becomes maddening, and in the back of the store, past the stock rooms, there's the freezer. Employees call it the ice box. They joke about it. They say it's colder than hell itself. But one employee learned that it's no joke. His name was Chris, a 26-year-old overnight stalker who'd only been working there for 3 months. He was the kind of guy people liked. Easygoing, always cracking jokes, the type who could make 12 hours of stocking shelves feel like a party. And yet, it was Chris who walked into the freezer one night and never came back out. It happened on a Tuesday around 3:15 in the morning. Chris told a coworker he was going to grab a coffee and take his 10-minute break inside the freezer, since the cold air helped wake him up. They all laughed about it. Who the hell takes a break in a freezer? But Chris did. The cameras in the back hallway caught him walking toward the heavy steel door, styrofoam cup in hand, steam rising from it. He turned back to the camera once, gave a goofy little salute, and pushed the door open. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. The freezer door has a safety mechanism. No matter what, it can be opened from the inside. But 30 minutes later, when his coworker realized Chris hadn't come back, they went to check. The freezer was empty. No Chris, no coffee cup, no footprints in the frost, just silence and the hum of the fans. They thought maybe he was pulling a prank. Maybe he'd slipped out, hidden in the racks, or gone for a smoke. But the security tapes told another story. They rewound the footage and stared in confusion. Chris walked into the freezer at 3:15, but in all the hours of footage after that, the door never opened again. Not once. He never came out. The police were called, of course. They searched the freezer top to bottom. Every shelf, every box of frozen pizzas, every bag of vegetables. Nothing. They checked the loading docks, the bathrooms, the parking lot. It was as if he had dissolved into the cold air. But that wasn't the end of it. Over the next week, employees started whispering about strange noises. The night crew, half delirious from exhaustion, swore they heard knocking coming from inside the freezer door, sometimes faint, sometimes so loud it echoed through the back rooms. One worker said it sounded like a fist pounding, begging to be let out. But every time they opened the door, the room was empty. Another said she heard muffled words, low, desperate, like someone gasping, "Help me." The managers dismissed it all as stress, nerves, maybe grief. But the knocking didn't stop. Then, one night, a janitor cleaning the hallway swore he saw something. He was buffing the floor near the freezer door when the sound started again, a sharp thud, thud, thud from inside the steel. He froze, staring at the door handle, when suddenly frost bloomed across the outside of the door in the shape of a handprint. 5 fingers spread wide, pressed from the inside out. He screamed, dropped the mop, and ran. The camera caught it, the janitor fleeing, but the door, the handprint, it was there for exactly 3 seconds, before melting away like it had never existed. Weeks passed. Corporate wanted the rumors shut down. "Do not discuss the missing employee with customers." They ordered, "Do not encourage ghost stories." But employees were quitting left and right. The night crew shrank from 10 people to 3. Nobody wanted to walk down that hallway. Nobody wanted to be the one sent to grab frozen meat or ice cream. Some refused outright, saying the freezer was cursed. Finally, maintenance was called in. They were supposed to do a full defrost and check the freezer unit. It hadn't been cleaned in years, and management hoped that maybe this would clear the air. But when the maintenance team shut down the fans and the frost began to melt, they discovered something that froze the blood of every single person there. On the inside wall of the freezer, hidden beneath layers of ice, were scratches. Deep, frantic grooves torn into the metal by fingernails until they broke. And next to the scratches, barely legible through the corrosion, were words. Dozens of times, over and over again, the same phrase carved into the wall. Lepmut. No one could explain it. The police had combed that freezer a dozen times and never found those markings. The scratches weren't old, they were fresh. Sharp edges, raw metal exposed. But the thing that made everyone sick to their stomach was the length of the scratches. Some were over 6 feet high, as though Chris had been climbing the walls, desperately clawing for escape. Except there was no Chris. His body was never found. No fingerprints. No trace of him outside of that frozen graffiti. The store closed that section for months. Corporate tried to paint over it, sand it down, but the words seemed to bleed back through, like the metal itself refused to forget. LT Mami still faintly glimmered beneath the new coat of paint, shimmering when the light hit just right, and the knocking. It never stopped. Employees say it's quieter now, more patient. Sometimes, during the long nights, the freezer door rattles as if someone inside is testing it, waiting for it to open. The building manager who was there at the time quit soon after, saying he couldn't take it anymore. When a reporter asked him years later what really happened, he refused to talk about it. All he said was, it wasn't just the scratches. There was something else, something in that freezer with him. But he wouldn't elaborate. What happened to Chris inside that freezer room remains a mystery. Maybe he suffocated. Maybe he was crushed in some hidden vent. Or maybe, and this is what the workers whisper, maybe the freezer itself took him. Maybe there's something in that cold, endless dark that can keep a man alive just long enough to hear his own screams bounce back at him until his voice is gone. And maybe that's why, even now, if you stand outside that freezer door in the dead of night and press your ear to the steel, you can still hear it. A faint, ragged whisper, repeating the same 3 words carved into the wall. Let me out. Walmart at night has its own kind of silence, the kind that isn't peaceful but suffocating. Like the store itself is holding its breath. The aisles are nearly empty. The intercom hums with static, and the fluorescent lights buzz as if they're alive. People think of Walmart as a safe, ordinary place, but those who've shopped late at night know different. They've seen her, the woman who never buys anything, the woman who doesn't belong there, the one who follows you to your car. The first reports were almost laughed off. Customers would tell managers that some woman had been pacing behind them while they shopped, never saying a word, just pushing an empty cart. They said she clutched something to her chest, always hidden under a coat or pressed close to her body. When asked what it was, every single witness described the same thing: a doll. A dirty, cracked porcelain doll, its face chipped, its glassy eyes reflecting the overhead lights in a way that made it look almost alive. At first, employees thought she was homeless, maybe mentally ill, just looking for warmth. But there was something wrong with the way she moved. One man described it like this: she never blinked. Not once. I swear I walked past her for 10 minutes straight and her eyes never left me. Her feet shuffled, her cart squeaked, and she just stared. It felt like she was timing my every move. The creepiest part was that no one ever saw her walk through the front doors. Cameras showed her inside the aisles, but not entering. One frame she'd be gone, The next, she'd be standing under the fluorescent lights, pushing that empty cart. It wasn't until customers began complaining about the parking lot that things turned darker. A woman who came in around midnight noticed the figure in her rearview mirror after she loaded her bags. She swore the strange woman was standing just inches from her trunk, staring at the reflection, doll clutched to her chest. When the driver turned to look, the woman was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just vanished. Another man said he felt watched while unloading groceries. He glanced up at the security pole camera and saw her standing directly beside his car on the monitor. But when he looked back, nothing. Just empty asphalt. The tape from that night was reviewed, and sure enough, she appeared on the footage for a split second, pale, stringy hair, the doll peeking out from her coat, head tilted too far to one side. Then she flickered out of frame like bad reception. By now, word was spreading. Employees were terrified of the late shift. They whispered about her between stocking shelves, saying if you looked too long into her face, she'd follow you home. One cashier claimed she saw the woman standing by her car in the employee lot after closing, even though she knew she had locked up before anyone could get outside. Another swore the doll's eyes moved on their own, following him across the lot until he couldn't breathe. Then came the night everything changed. A young mother was shopping with her daughter close to 1 a.m. She noticed the woman first in the toy aisle. The cart squeak drew her attention. The stranger stood perfectly still, one hand clutching the doll, the other resting on the cart handle. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. The mother tried to ignore her, but every aisle she walked down, the woman appeared again. Frozen, silent, eyes locked on the child. By the time they reached the registers, the little girl whispered, "Mommy, the doll is smiling at me." That broke her. She abandoned her cart, grabbed her daughter's hand, and rushed out to the car. The parking lot was nearly empty, but halfway across it the woman stepped out from behind a row of cars. Not walking, not running, just there, blocking the path. The mother described the sound as the most unnatural thing she'd ever heard. The doll's porcelain head grinding against the woman's coat as she tilted it toward the girl. The mother didn't wait. She shoved her daughter into the back seat, locked the doors, and started the car. But before she could pull away, she heard it, a slow, deliberate tapping on the passenger window. When she turned, the woman was there, inches from the glass, doll pressed against it. The doll's eyes were level with the little girl's face. And in the reflection of that glass, the mother swore she saw the doll blink. She slammed the gas and sped off, shaking. But when she got home, something was waiting. Sitting neatly on the hood of her car was the doll, the same cracked porcelain face, the same lifeless glass eyes. Only this time, the hair looked different. It was darker, softer, real. It wasn't synthetic doll hair anymore. It was human. The police were called, but by the time they arrived, the doll was gone. They dismissed it as stress, paranoia, maybe a prank. But the cameras told another story. Footage from the lot showed the mother's car sitting alone. Then, frame by frame, the doll simply appeared on the hood, as if materializing out of thin air. No woman, no footsteps, just the doll. Employees swear she still wanders the aisles some nights, especially near the toy section. Sometimes the doll sits abandoned in a cart for hours, then disappears. Sometimes customers claim they smell a faint perfume, old-fashioned and powdery, lingering in the air even though no one is around. Security guards refuse to walk women to their cars after dark, not because of men, but because of her. And the detail no one wants to talk about. When they pulled one of the old tapes and slowed it frame by frame, they saw something impossible. The woman wasn't holding the doll. She wasn't even touching it. The doll was clinging to her, arms wrapped tight around her chest like a child that refused to be put down. And in one frame, barely visible through the grainy footage, the doll's cracked mouth curved into something unmistakable. A smile. To this day, the employees of that Walmart swear the lot is cursed. They tell each other not to shop after midnight, not to make eye contact with strange women pushing empty carts, and above all, If you see a doll sitting on your hood when you leave the store, don't take it home. They say every Walmart has its regulars, the same faces drifting through the aisles every night. But the strangest regular wasn't a customer. It was a cart collector, a quiet young man who pushed lines of metal carts across the lot in the dead hours of night. To most people, he was invisible. But if you looked closely enough, if you ever stayed late enough, you'd notice something about him that didn't fit. He wasn't just working, he was talking, laughing, pointing at things that weren't there. And when people asked him who he was talking to, his answer was always the same. The boy in the red shorts shows me where the lost carts are. At first, employees brushed it off. Maybe he was lonely, maybe he was joking. But then customers started noticing it too. One man loading groceries swore he heard the cart collector whispering near the returns, voice low and tender like he was coaxing a child to follow him. Another said he saw him crouched behind a parked van, speaking into the darkness, nodding as though listening to answers no one else could hear. The creepiest part, every single witness described the same words muttered from his lips. Don't wander too far. The shadows will find you. Security guards tried to brush it off until they checked the cameras. The footage showed the cart collector moving across the lot alone. His lips moved constantly, his hands gestured in conversation, and sometimes he laughed like a child had just told him a joke. But there was no one with him, nothing but rows of parked cars and the endless fluorescent glow of the lot. Yet when they slowed the tape, frame by frame, they saw something that made them freeze. His shadow wasn't copying him. It lagged. It twitched. It moved differently than he did. When he pointed one way, the shadow pointed another. When he laughed, the shadow's mouth didn't move. And once, just once, the shadow turned its head toward the camera. One night, another employee, curious and a little disturbed, asked the cart collector directly, "Who are you always talking to out there?" The young man's smile faded and his eyes grew distant. "He's just a kid," he whispered, "a little boy in red shorts. He waits near the cart returns. You don't see him because he only comes out when the lot goes quiet. He tells me which carts are lost, and I bring them back. But sometimes," his voice dropped lower, "sometimes he tells me things he shouldn't know." When asked what he meant, the cart collector refused to explain. But later, while on break, he told another employee something worse. He claimed the boy had told him details about his past, things he'd never told a soul, things about his childhood, the woods behind his house, and what had happened there when he was 9. The next morning, that employee quit. He never came back, and he never explained why. The stories spread, and soon the cart collector became a kind of local legend. Customers avoided him. Cashiers whispered when he passed by. Some nights, people swore they saw him pushing carts with a small shadow darting behind him, child-sized, flickering just out of the corner of their eyes. Other nights, they heard the squeak of a cart wheel echo long after the lot had gone empty, as if someone was still pushing, still collecting. The breaking point came on a stormy night. The wind howled across the asphalt, and the rain came down in sheets. Most employees stayed inside, refusing to step into the lot. But the cart collector, as always, pushed his line of carts, head bent against the storm. Security cameras caught everything. The carts rolling, his lips moving, his gestures sharp and frantic, like he was arguing with someone only he could see. The rain blurred the footage, but something else moved across the frame. A smaller figure, pale and darting, always just beyond the light. Then the cart collector stopped. He dropped the handle of the carts and turned his head slowly toward the cart return at the far end of the lot. His mouth moved. One word was caught on the audio. Coming. He walked into the darkness, away from the light, away from the safety of the cameras, and he never came back. By morning, the carts were still there, abandoned in the middle of the lot. The manager called the police, and a search was launched. They found no trace of him, no footprints in the mud, no sign of struggle, nothing. It was as if the storm had swallowed him whole. But there was one detail they did find. Under the cart return, half buried in wet gravel, lay a pair of small red shorts, child-sized, soaked through old, decayed. No child had been reported missing that week, that month, or even that year. But when they checked the police archives, they found a case from decades earlier, a boy who had vanished from that very area. The last detail in the report chilled them. Witnesses had said he was wearing bright red shorts. The shorts were bagged and sent for testing, but no results were ever made public. Employees said the police dropped the case, wrote the cart collector off as a runaway. But those who worked the night shift knew better. They swore they still saw him sometimes, out of the corner of their eyes, pushing carts alone in the storm, lips moving in conversation with someone who wasn't there. And if you stood still long enough in that lot, you could hear it too. The faint squeak of wheels, the soft sound of a child's laugh, and a voice whispering from the shadows, "Don't wander too far." They say if you're ever in that Walmart lot past midnight, and you see a cart collector talking to himself, don't look too closely. Don't follow the sound of his laughter. And above all, if you see a flicker of red dart between the cars, get in your car, lock the doors, and drive away without looking back. Because the boy in the red shorts doesn't just show people where the carts are, he shows them where the shadows wait. There's a reason night shift employees at certain Walmarts refuse to use the far bathroom near the back of the store. Customers walk right past it every day without thinking. But the people who clean it, who stock the shelves when the aisles are empty, they know the stories. They call it the knocking game. It sounds stupid when you first hear it, like some childish dare, but when you've lived it, when you've heard it, you never laugh about it again. Because once the knocking starts, it doesn't stop until you've listened long enough, or worse, until you've answered. It always begins the same way, just past midnight, when the store is too quiet and the hum of the fluorescent lights feels louder than your own thoughts. The bathroom at the back of the building goes cold. People have stepped in and felt it immediately. Like stepping into a basement after a rainstorm. The air feels heavy, damp, wrong, and then comes the sound, 3 slow knocks, a pause, then 2 more, always the same rhythm, always coming from the last stall on the left. The stall is locked from the inside, though no one is ever seen going in. At first, employees thought it was just some prank, a kid sneaking in, banging on the door to freak out the night crew. But when security checked, it was always the same. The stall was empty. The lock was snapped into place, but the inside had no footprints, no sign anyone had ever been there. They even taped off the stall once, chain locked the door so it couldn't be touched. But still the knocking came. 3, pause, 2, over and over again, until whoever was inside the bathroom left, shaken, swearing they could feel eyes watching them through the cracks. Customers reported it too. One woman went in late at night while her husband waited outside. She came out pale, trembling, asking if anyone had followed her in. When he said no, she explained she had heard the knocking, steady and deliberate, and then a whisper that slid under the door like smoke. "Do you know the game?" She swore she hadn't imagined it. She swore the whisper came from inside the locked stall. Security tried to laugh it off, until one of their own got curious. A guard named Mason, who'd been working nights for years, decided to test it. He heard the knocking on one shift, 3, and instead of running, he crouched down by the locked stall and knocked back. The same rhythm, 3, pause, 2. For a moment, the bathroom went silent. He chuckled, stood up, about to leave. Then came the reply. Not the same rhythm, something else, a frantic, violent pounding that shook the metal door on its hinges. The sound was so loud it echoed down the hallway. Mason swore later that the stall door bent outward, like something was pressing against it from inside, trying to crawl out. He bolted, slammed the bathroom door behind him, and when he dragged the other guards in minutes later, the knocking had stopped. The stall was unlocked and empty, but the paint on the inside of the door was scratched, deep grooves carved into the metal, like fingernails had clawed at it from within. After that, no one wanted to play the game. They'd hear the knocking sometimes, muffled but insistent, and they'd leave. Some even called out sick rather than clean that bathroom. But every few months, someone new would try. Usually a young worker, cocky, convinced it was all just a campfire story told on breaks. They'd go in, hear the knocks, and think it was harmless fun to knock back. And every single time, they came out different, pale, shaking, refusing to talk about what they saw or what they heard after the door swung open. The worst was a girl named Angie. She'd only been on the job 2 weeks when she decided to prove the stories wrong. She told her coworkers she was going to answer the knock and see what happened. They tried to talk her out of it, but she laughed, said she wasn't scared. That night, she went in during her break. Cameras caught her walking toward the bathroom. They caught her going inside, but they never caught her coming out. When her coworkers noticed she was gone, they searched the store. The bathroom door was wide open. The stall at the end hung loose, swinging slightly on its hinges. Angie's phone was found on the sink, flashlight still on, camera app open like she'd been trying to record something. But the footage was useless. Static glitches, frames skipping like the phone had been dropped into water. In the background, faint and distorted, the knocking still played. 3. Pause 2. Police combed the building, tore through the walls, searched the sewer line beneath the store. Nothing. Angie was gone. The official story was that she had walked out of the building and disappeared on her own. But her coworkers knew better. They knew because in the weeks after, the knocking didn't stop. It got louder, more insistent, and sometimes late at night, when the bathroom was empty, they swore they could hear Angie's voice whispering from the stall. Not playful, not mocking, pleading, begging. Words that chilled them to the bone. Don't answer. Don't answer. The store shut down that bathroom eventually, boarded it up, sealed the hallway with a locked door. But it didn't matter, the knocking moved. First to the employee restroom, then to the fitting rooms. Always the same rhythm. 3. Pause. 2. Sometimes on the walls, sometimes under the floor, sometimes from inside the mirror as if the glass itself was hollow. And always at night, when the aisles were silent, when the lights hummed and the shadows stretched long. To this day, the night crew swears it follows them. Some have quit, refusing to step foot in the building again. Others stay, but they've learned the rules. If you hear it, don't respond. Don't knock back. Don't speak. Just leave. Because once you answer, once you let it know you're listening, the game doesn't end. And sometimes, people who play don't come back out. And if you think this sounds like an exaggeration, ask the employees who worked the night Angie vanished. Ask the janitor who found the scratches carved into the stall, deep and fresh, spelling a single word, S-T-A-Y. Ask the guards who watched the cameras and saw her reflection in the mirror days after she was gone, standing behind them, knocking on the glass. So next time you're in a Walmart late at night and you hear it, 3 knocks, pause, 2 more. Don't test it. Don't be curious. Don't play the game. Just walk away, even if it means leaving your cart, even if it means holding it in until morning. Because the bathroom knocking game doesn't care who you are, it only cares that you listen. And once you do, it won't stop until you're on the other side of the door. They said he had the kind of smile that made you feel seen, not in the warm, comforting way that most greeters at Walmart try to put across, but in a way that left you unsettled, like he knew far more about you than he should. Dozens of customers, from families with kids to lonely night shoppers, swore they were greeted by an elderly man in a blue vest standing at the sliding entrance doors. He was always there, his posture bent slightly forward, his voice low but crystal clear when he said the same thing every single time. "Welcome back, I remember you." At first, people brushed it off as good customer service. Some joked about how Walmart must have hired the most dedicated greeter in the state, someone who took pride in his work. except no one ever seemed to see him outside of those sliding doors. No one ever saw him walking to the bathroom, taking a lunch break, or chatting with coworkers. It was always just that same moment of contact, his wrinkled face lit up by the buzzing fluorescent lights, his eyes watery but sharp, his teeth too white for someone his age. And then you'd move past him down the aisles, thinking about how oddly personal his words had sounded. The employees, though, told a different story. Ask any of them, and they'd insist that no such man was on payroll. There were younger greeters, middle-aged ones, even a retired schoolteacher who worked weekends, but never an old man with thinning gray hair and a vest faded from decades of wear. The strangest part, customers who reported him all described the exact same figure, down to the cracked watch on his wrist and the stitched NAMA tag that didn't match the current uniforms. His name, soon in crooked letters, was Arthur. One woman recalled leaving late one night. It was just before midnight when the parking lot was half empty, and the automatic doors kept stuttering from the heavy wind outside. As she pushed her cart forward, she saw Arthur standing by the exit instead of the entrance. Same smile, same words, except this time he leaned closer and whispered, "Don't park so far away next time. You know what happened out there." She laughed it off at first, until she realized her car was the only one left sitting far from the light poles, in the shadows at the very edge of the lot. And when she looked back at the glass doors, Arthur was gone. Curiosity turned into paranoia. Customers began asking to see security footage. They wanted proof that this smiling old man was real, that he wasn't some collective trick of the imagination. Management finally gave in and pulled up hours of footage. At first, it looked normal, sliding doors opening, carts rolling through, people entering with their heads down. But then came the reports. In every single case where someone claimed to have interacted with Arthur, the cameras showed nothing, just empty doors. People walking forward, sometimes smiling, sometimes pausing briefly as though listening to someone speak. But no one was there, until one frame caught something. It was brief, almost like static in the feed. A flicker of an outline. For a second, there he was, an elderly man in a blue vest, mouth stretched too wide in a grin, standing inches from a woman clutching her toddler. But here's the part that rattled everyone in the room. On the footage from another angle, shot at the exact same time, Arthur wasn't there at all. Just the woman frozen in place, eyes widening as if she'd heard something chilling, whispered directly in her ear. The staff who reviewed that footage refused to work night shifts after that. One of them, a young cashier, went so far as to quit the job entirely. She said she had been walking through the entrance on her break when she felt someone brush against her arm. She turned, and there he was, Arthur, his face so close she could see the burst veins in his pupils. He said nothing this time, only smiled, and when she blinked, gone. But she swore his reflection lingered in the glass long after. Things escalated when a local historian overheard the rumors and decided to look into them. He pulled old employment records, newspaper clippings, and photographs from the 1990s. Buried in the archives, he found an image that made his blood run cold. There, in an old company newsletter, was a photo of Walmart's first team of greeters in that town. And standing dead center was Arthur, NAMA tag crooked, watch strapped to his wrist, smiling exactly the way customers described him decades later. But Arthur never retired. He never transferred to another store. According to the records, he died in the parking lot on a winter night in 1993. The official report listed it as a heart attack. He collapsed while walking to his car after a late shift. Paramedics couldn't revive him. That very spot, it turned out, was the farthest corner of the lot, the same place the woman had parked when Arthur warned her not to. After this discovery, sightings only increased. Customers swore they'd hear his voice even if they didn't see him, a whisper brushing past their ears the moment they stepped through the sliding doors. Some reported feeling compelled to glance at the old photo pinned on the employee bulletin board, the one of Arthur grinning proudly with his fellow greeters. Except when one employee finally pulled it down, The smile on Arthur's face was gone. In its place, his lips were pressed tight, his eyes glaring, as though furious at being recognized. Today, staff avoid saying his name out loud, claiming it only makes him appear more often, but customers still talk about him. The greeter who wasn't on payroll. The man who always remembers your face. The one who smiles because he never left. And every so often, someone walking into that Walmart at midnight swears they still hear him, just behind the hiss of the sliding doors, whispering in a voice too cold to belong to the living, "Welcome back, I remember you." It started with something small, something most employees thought was a prank, nothing more than a nuisance. The lost and found box at the Walmart on Greenridge Highway, always filled with odd things: gloves, sunglasses, the occasional wallet or toy left behind by distracted parents. But one morning, sitting right at the top of the pile, was a porcelain doll. Its face was smooth and pale, almost too perfect, with painted eyes that caught the light like they were wet. The dress it wore was dated, an old-fashioned blue with lace trim, like something from decades ago. Nights came and went, shifts rotated, and every morning it was the same. The overnight crew would clean out the box, tossing junk into the back dumpster if no one claimed it. But by the next day, the doll was back, always the same one, always placed neatly at the top of the pile, as if waiting for someone to notice it. Employees joked about it at first, even gave it a name, Clarabelle. But no one ever admitted to putting it there. What unsettled people most wasn't that the doll kept returning. It was the fact that it never looked quite the same. Some mornings Clarabelle's head tilted to the left instead of the right. Sometimes her tiny porcelain hands would be folded together, sometimes resting at her sides. And once her dress was completely different, no longer the faded blue but a little pink outfit, the exact same description of what a girl named Amelia Hadley had been wearing the day she went missing just outside that very store 2 years earlier. One employee, a stalker named Ivor, swore that while working a late shift he heard something inside the lost and found box. A tiny scratching sound, like fingernails on cardboard. When he lifted the lid, the doll sat there staring back at him, its painted lips slightly parted, as if it had just exhaled. He left the box open after that, refusing to touch it again. Managers didn't take long to notice the strange reports piling up. They reviewed security footage, but the cameras that overlooked the customer service desk, the same place the lost and found sat, showed nothing unusual. The doll was never placed there by a customer. It simply appeared. Sometimes between 2 and 3 a.m., the feed would flicker, and when it cleared again, the doll was there. Then things escalated. Employees began finding little objects tucked into Clarabelle's dress pockets. Pieces of candy, a button, once even a child's shoelace tied into a neat bow. One night, Clarabelle's lap held a tiny, frayed red ribbon. When the local news ran an update on missing children, a grieving mother came forward after seeing a photo. She claimed the ribbon belonged to her daughter. She'd tied it in her little girl's hair the day she vanished. That was when people stopped joking. Clarabelle wasn't funny anymore. Ivor, already shaken by the scratching he'd heard, started refusing shifts near the desk. He told his coworkers he'd woken up at home one night to find the doll sitting in the corner of his bedroom. He swore on his life that he'd thrown it in the dumpster that morning before leaving work. He screamed so loud his neighbors came banging on the door. When they turned on the lights, the doll was gone. The overnight manager at the time was a woman named Selwyn. She tried to keep order, tried to convince her staff it was all paranoia, mass hysteria from overworked employees. But one morning, the lost and found box held something no one could explain. Clarabelle was sitting upright as usual, her pale hands folded neatly in her lap. But this time, she was holding a Walmart employee badge. The badge belonged to Selwyn. By the end of her shift, Selwyn quit. No notice, no explanation. She simply left the keys on the counter, walked out of the automatic doors, and never returned. Later, when employees tried to call her, her number was disconnected. Rumors spread fast. Some said she left the state. Others whispered she hadn't left at all, that she'd joined the list of missing. And still, Clarabelle remained. Some customers claimed to see the doll in places she shouldn't be, sitting inside carts left in the lot, staring from the end of an aisle. One man swore he saw her reflection in a freezer door, even though the space behind him was empty. Parents started pulling their kids closer when walking past the customer service desk, some refusing to shop there altogether. The breaking point came for Ivor. He worked his last overnight when he heard a sound so faint he thought it was his imagination, a giggle. A child's giggle, coming from the lost and found box. His hands shook as he opened the lid. The doll was there, as always, but this time her porcelain face had a crack running down one side. Through that crack, Ivor swore he saw something move. Not plastic, not stuffing. Something wet, something alive, something that blinked. He slammed the lid shut and quit on the spot. He told anyone who'd listen that Clarabelle wasn't a doll at all, but a shell, a container for something that fed on memory, on grief, on children who never came home. To this day, employees say the lost and found box at Greenridge Highway Walmart still isn't empty. It doesn't matter if you toss Clarabelle into the dumpster, shred her, or even burn her. By morning, she's back, sitting there, porcelain face glowing under the harsh fluorescent lights, waiting for someone to claim her. But the scariest part, when new hires come in and ask about the doll, they're told not to worry, not to look too closely. Yet every now and then, someone swears they hear her whispering as they walk by, her painted mouth never moving, the words cold and unmistakable. I remember you. And if you listen long enough, they say you can hear her add something else, softer this time, almost like a promise. You'll be with me soon. Story began with a whisper, the kind of thing most people would dismiss as background noise in a massive, echoing Walmart. The intercom crackled the way it always did, a sharp burst of static followed by silence like the speakers were exhaling. But then one night, just past 1100 p.m., when the store was nearly empty and only a skeleton crew worked the aisles, the voice came. It wasn't the voice of any employee. It wasn't the calm, scripted announcements shoppers were used to. It was high-pitched, sing-song, and disturbingly childish. The first name it said was clear, slow, and chilling. Isolde, come home. There was no Isolde on the night shift roster. No customer by that name had been paged. In fact, no one had touched the intercom system at all. The overnight assistant manager, a man named Corbin, rushed to the service desk and asked who had made the announcement. The staff looked at him blankly. The phone at the podium hadn't been picked up, and the light that blinked whenever the system was live never lit up. It was as if the intercom had spoken on its own. The team brushed it off as a technical glitch, a crossed wire, maybe a radio signal bleeding into the system. But the next night, just after 1100 again, the voice returned. A different name this time. Leora, come home. The sound was clearer now, not distorted by static, but sharp enough to echo down the aisles. It had that unmistakable tone of a child calling to someone they missed. Employees checked the system, rewired it, even shut it off at the breaker. But every night, at the same time, the voice returned. And every time it called a new name, Corbin kept a list. He started jotting down each name the intercom whispered. It wasn't just names you'd hear every day. It was always something unusual, strange, like the names belonged to a forgotten generation. After Leora came Anselm. After Anselm came Avad. Nobody on staff knew anyone by those names, and at first, the employees laughed nervously, calling it creepy but harmless. But that changed when one of the cart pushers came in pale one morning, holding a newspaper under his arm. He showed Corbin the obituary section. There it was, Leora Manning, dead at 46, died in her sleep at home, just 3 days after the name had been whispered over the speakers. Corbin's stomach turned. He flipped back through his notes. Isolde. He ran the name through the local records online. Isolde Hennings, 82. She had passed the same week. Anselm Vore, 29. Killed in a car crash 2 days later. Every single name the intercom called belonged to someone real, someone local, and all of them were dead within the week. By now, the employees didn't joke anymore. The store grew colder at night, like the fluorescent lights hummed at a lower frequency, draining the warmth out of everything. Stalkers whispered that they felt watched, as if eyes lingered in the shadows at the ends of aisles. Customers who shopped late swore they heard the faint sound of children giggling near the toy section when it was empty. But the worst part came when the intercom started calling the names of employees. The first was Jaron, a quiet kid who worked in electronics. At 11:02 p.m., the speakers hissed alive, and in that same childlike voice, they all heard it, "Jaron, come home." He froze, dropping the stack of DVDs he was shelving. Everyone turned to him, their faces pale. He tried to laugh it off, tried to say it was a coincidence. But 3 nights later, Jaron was gone, found in his car, parked along a dark county road, the engine still running, his eyes wide open as if he'd seen something that terrified him to death. After that, panic set in. Employees begged to be scheduled on day shifts only. Some quit without explanation, leaving their uniforms in the break room. Corbin himself stopped sleeping. He was terrified his name would be called. Every night, he'd stand near the service desk, watching the intercom like it was a living thing. He even unplugged the whole system, wires dangling loose. But it didn't matter. At 1100 sharp, the speakers sparked with life, and the voice returned. One night, after a long week of silence from management, Corbin heard it again. This time, it said a name he recognized instantly. "Corbin, come home." His blood froze. The employees nearby went stiff, staring at him. Some backed away. He grabbed the phone, yanking it off the hook, screaming into it, demanding whoever was doing this to stop. But the line was dead. He slammed it down and ran out of the store, refusing to come back. 2 days later, Corbin's apartment caught fire. Investigators said it started in the wiring of his living room wall. But the strange part, neighbors swore they heard voices over the static of the emergency scanners as the fire burned. One neighbor even swore she heard a child's voice drifting through the smoke. "Corbin, come home." Walmart corporate tried to shut the rumors down. They replaced the sound system, even gutted the entire intercom wiring. But it didn't matter. Within weeks, the employees at that same store reported the voice again, always at 1100, always a new name, and the deaths never stopped. The scariest detail, one cashier, a woman named Ziva, swore she recognized the voice one night. She said it didn't just sound like any child. It sounded like her younger brother, who had drowned years earlier. When she broke down crying, another employee admitted he thought it sounded like his sister who died in a car wreck. It was never the same voice for everyone. Each person heard someone different, someone they'd lost. That was when the theory spread. The intercom wasn't just calling names. It wasn't announcing at all. It was luring, like something inside the walls was reaching out, mimicking the voices of the dead, pulling the living closer to wherever home was. And to this day, no one's sure what home means. A grave, a fire, an empty road in the middle of the night. All they know is this: at Greenfield Walmart, every night at 1100, the speakers hiss alive. And somewhere, in that childlike tone that cuts through bone, a new name is whispered. If you're unlucky enough to be there, you'll hear it. And if it's your name, no matter how far you run, you won't make it to next week. Because the intercom doesn't ask, it commands, "Come home." It was supposed to be a routine shift, the kind where nothing ever really happened. The Walmart in Ash Grove had the same fluorescent hum, the same bland carpets in the clothing section, and the same fitting rooms lined with mirrors that had been there for years. Nobody thought twice about them. They were just mirrors, until the complaints started. At first, it was small things. Customers said their reflections didn't line up perfectly. A woman named Mavis reported that when she raised her arm, her reflection hesitated for just a second before following. Another swore her reflection's eyes blinked slower than her own. Employees laughed it off. Bad lighting, old glass, people just imagining things. But then came the scream. A teenage girl tried on a jacket in one of the fitting rooms. When she looked up, her reflection smiled before she did. She bolted out of the booth, pale and shaking, swearing the thing in the mirror was still grinning when she ran. Other customers brushed past her, annoyed, but one older man swore he peeked inside afterward and saw her reflection still there, standing in the mirror, staring out at him. That's when Walmart sent maintenance. The glass was checked, replaced, even tested under different lights. Nothing was wrong, yet the complaints grew stranger. A mother trying on clothes with her child swore she saw herself in the mirror without the boy at her side. A young man saw bruises on his reflection's neck that weren't on his skin. And one woman, staring into the mirror far too long, whispered that her reflection whispered back. Among the night crew, the weirdest experiences were reserved for one employee, a soft-spoken stalker named Rhaenyra. She was quiet, almost painfully so, with pale features and a way of staring too long at things like she was listening for secrets. One night, tasked with cleaning the fitting rooms after closing, she lingered by the mirrors. Later she admitted she had heard her own name whispered, not by anyone in the store, but from behind the glass. When she told her coworkers, they teased her, saying she was just spooking herself in the silence of night shifts. But then her behavior began to change. She spent more time near the fitting rooms, sometimes just standing in front of the mirrors long after her tasks were finished, lips moving as though having a conversation. Once, another employee swore they caught her reaching out to touch the glass, and her reflection's hand didn't line up. By the third week, customers were starting to avoid the fitting rooms altogether. One woman fainted after she saw her reflection step forward when she hadn't moved. A man left in tears, swearing the reflection wasn't his at all. It was his dead father, smiling at him from behind the glass. Management panicked, but no one wanted to deal with the fitting rooms after hours. No one except Rhaenyra. She began requesting the duty. Alone in the dim light, she would disappear inside, sometimes for hours. The other employees whispered about it, and some refused to even walk down that aisle when she was there. They said if you did, you'd hear faint voices from inside the fitting rooms, overlapping, like dozens of people whispering all at once. One night, just after 200 a.m., the cameras caught something no one could explain. The footage showed Rhaenyra stepping into a fitting room. She stood there for a moment, then the mirror seemed to ripple, like water disturbed by a hand. Slowly, impossibly, her reflection leaned forward and smiled at her, and then, without Rhaenyra moving at all, the reflection stepped through. The footage blurred, distorted with static, but employees who watched swore they saw two figures, now Rhaenyra standing still, and another version of her moving, smiling, walking out of the booth. When managers stormed the area minutes later, the fitting room was empty. The mirror, spotless, and Rhaenyra was gone. Her locker was checked, her belongings untouched. Her car still sat in the lot, but no one saw her leave. When police were called, the footage mysteriously vanished. The cameras glitched at the exact moment her reflection stepped out. Corporate called it a malfunction. But every night after that, employees swore they saw her face in the mirrors. Not the Rhaenyra they remembered, though. This one had sharper teeth, sunken eyes, and a grin that looked too wide for her face. Customers began reporting her too. They'd try on a shirt, glance up, and see a pale woman standing in the corner of the reflection, always smiling, always watching. When they turned around, the room was empty. Some employees transferred stores, some quit. But those who stayed learned a rule: never look into the mirrors too long, because if you did, you'd notice small things. Your reflection lagging, your smile forming too late, your eyes glancing in a direction you hadn't turned. And if you lingered long enough, if you stared into your own eyes until your head spun, sometimes your reflection wouldn't blink when you did. Sometimes it would keep staring unbroken, its smile stretching wider, its lips whispering something you couldn't quite hear. And on the nights when the store was empty, when the air conditioning hummed like a heartbeat, and the fluorescent lights flickered. Employees swore they saw people in those mirrors who didn't belong at all. Not customers, not co-workers, strangers, children, sometimes even the dead. The most disturbing story came from a janitor named Orvik. He was cleaning near the fitting rooms after hours when he swore he saw someone trapped inside the glass, pounding on it with both hands. He rushed forward, terrified, and realized it was himself. His own reflection was the one begging to get out, and behind it, smiling over its shoulder, was Rhaenyra. He quit the next day. Management eventually boarded up the fitting rooms. New construction, they said, but everyone knew why. Employees whispered that even with the mirrors covered, you could still hear faint tapping from the walls, like fingernails trying to get through. Some nights, when the store was empty, a voice still called softly from behind the plywood, a female voice, familiar and sweet, whispering the same line over and over, "Come look at me just once more." But the ones who gave in, who peeled back the corner of the covering and dared to peek, never worked another shift. Their names were struck from the schedule, their cars left behind in the parking lot, their phones ringing endlessly with no answer. It was as if the mirrors had claimed them the same way they had claimed Rhaenyra. And the scariest part, the construction was never finished. Months later, the boards came down. The mirrors were still there, and they were clean, too clean. Not a single scratch, not a single sign of age. Just endless glass, waiting for the next person foolish enough to look too long. And if you find yourself alone in that Walmart fitting room with nothing but your reflection staring back at you, remember this: the glass isn't showing you, it's showing what's waiting to replace you. They say every Walmart has its secrets, but the one I worked at in Ohio had something darker than anyone wanted to admit. We called it the blackout in aisle 17. It wasn't just a faulty light or a loose wire. It was a pattern. Every month without fail at exactly 3:12 m, the lights above that aisle would die. Not flicker. 1 second, blinding fluorescent white. The next, a suffocating black so thick you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. At first, people laughed it off. Employees shrugged, shoppers ignored it, and the night managers filed reports that were quickly buried under maintenance. But after a while, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every time the lights went out, the cameras monitoring that aisle glitched into static. For exactly 3 minutes. When the lights came back on, the footage would pick up as if nothing happened. Except sometimes, just before the feed cleared, you could make out faint shapes in the static. Shadows that weren't quite human, long and bending in ways bodies shouldn't bend. I didn't believe it until I met the one man who swore he'd been inside that darkness. His name was Rylan Calder, a strange name for a strange man. He'd been a stalker for years, the kind of guy who kept to himself, moved like he was always listening to something the rest of us couldn't hear. One night, I came in for a late shift and found him sitting alone in the break room, pale, sweating, clutching his uniform shirt like it had been ripped apart. It wasn't just torn. It looked shredded, like claws had dragged down the fabric in straight lines. Too perfect, too deep for a box cutter or shelf edge. He looked at me with wide, bloodshot eyes and whispered, "Don't go near 17 when it happens. You won't come back the same." Of course, I asked him what he meant, but he wouldn't explain. All he said was that he'd been stocking cereal when the lights went out, and in the silence, he felt something brushing past him, breathing on the back of his neck. He tried to call for help, but his voice died in his throat, smothered by the dark. Then came the sound, like dozens of whispers layered on top of each other, all hissing his name. When the lights came back, he was on the floor, shirt ripped, arms bleeding. Nobody else saw a thing. No one even heard him scream. That same week, Rylan quit, packed up and left town. No 2-week notice, no explanation, just gone. But the story didn't end with him leaving. Aisle 17 became something people avoided. At first, just employees, joking that it was cursed. Then customers started whispering about it too. I can't tell you how many times I heard someone say they felt cold there, even when the rest of the store was warm. Parents would pull their kids closer when walking past the cereal shelves, and sometimes late at night, we'd hear it. A soft voice drifting through the aisle, low enough you couldn't quite catch the words, but sharp enough to make every hair on your neck rise. Some swore it was Ryland's voice, whispering the names of people who passed through. I didn't believe them, until the night I found myself alone in that aisle. I wasn't supposed to be there. I'd forgotten my water bottle during a break, and instead of walking all the way back to the lockers, I cut through 17 to get to the vending machines. The moment my shoes touched the linoleum, the air shifted. You know that heavy silence that comes before a storm? It was like that, pressing against my ears, and then click. The lights died. Panic shot through me. My phone screen wouldn't turn on, no flashlight, nothing. The dark swallowed everything. I froze, listening. At first, there was nothing. Then the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving between the shelves. Not echoing like normal footsteps. These were too close, circling me. I held my breath, and then I heard it, a whisper. My name, not shouted, not even spoken like a question. Just breathed out, like the aisle itself was alive and calling to me. I wanted to scream, but the air in my lungs felt trapped, like something was squeezing my chest. I stumbled forward, hand outstretched, praying I'd find the end of the aisle before something else found me. My fingers brushed boxes, cereal, crackers, snacks, but the shelves felt wrong. Too warm, pulsing under my skin like veins under flesh. I yanked my hand back just as the whisper grew louder, joined by others, dozens of voices hissing at once. Some laughed, some cried. All of them said my name. And then, a sharp tug. My sleeve ripped as if a claw had swiped at me. I didn't look back. I just ran. The second I hit the end of the aisle, the lights flickered back on, bright, normal, like nothing had happened. I spun around, panting, but the aisle was empty. Everything in its place except my shirt. 3 deep gashes, running across my arm, too clean, too deliberate to be an accident. I didn't tell management. I didn't tell anyone. I just stuffed the shirt in my bag and swore I'd never set foot in that aisle again. But the nightmares came anyway. Every night since I wake at 3:12 am, gasping, hearing the whisper of my name in the dark. And here's the part that keeps me up. Ryland left town, but people still hear him in aisle 17. They say sometimes, if you're unlucky, the whispers don't just stay in the store. They follow you home. I didn't want to believe it until last week, when I came back from a late shift, dropped my keys on the counter, and heard it. A whisper from the corner of my apartment. Low, calm, dragging out my name the same way I'd heard it in the dark. I haven't been back to work since. I don't know if I ever will. Because aisle 17 isn't just a blackout, it's a doorway, and once it calls your name, it doesn't matter where you hide, eventually you'll answer. People always say Walmart never sleeps, that no matter the hour, there's always someone walking its endless aisles under the hum of fluorescent lights. But in our town, there's one story that made even the night shift veterans refuse to work alone. It wasn't about theft or violence or anything you could put in a police report. It was about a woman who came in one night with a cart full of groceries and never left. The cashier who rang her up was a woman named Lysandra Poe, a name as sharp as her personality. Lysandra had been working there nearly a decade, never late, never careless, always the one they called when the line stretched too long. She didn't scare easily. She dealt with drunks, angry customers, even shoplifters trying to run her over with carts. But this night was different. She remembered it clearly, because the customer didn't say a word. Not hello, not thank you, not even a grunt, just silence. An older woman, gray hair tied back in a bun, pale as paper under the lights. She wore a faded blue dress and a cardigan that looked decades out of style, and her cart was filled neatly, milk, bread, a roast, frozen vegetables, eggs. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place. What stuck with Lysandra was the way the woman's eyes never left hers. wide, unblinking, watching her with an intensity that made her hands shake as she scanned each item. When the last beep of the scanner echoed, the woman slid cash across the counter. Old bills, crumpled, faded, but real. Lysandra bagged the groceries, handed them back, and waited for the usual shuffle away. Instead, the woman lingered, still staring. Then she pushed her cart toward the exit, and that was the last time anyone saw her leave the checkout. The security cameras told a different story. The checkout footage clearly showed the woman. Every scan, every bag, every exchange of cash. But the exit camera, nothing. Not a blur, not a shadow. Just empty sliding doors opening and closing to no one. At first, they thought it was a glitch. But when they pulled the parking lot footage, it got worse. At 2:43 a.m., a cart appeared in the middle of the lot, full of the same groceries, bags intact, milk still cold. No car, no woman, no explanation. The manager locked the tapes away, muttering about malfunction and employee confidentiality. But word got around. You can't hide something like that in a store where gossip spreads faster than discounts. Some said the woman was a ghost. Others said she'd slipped into some space between cameras, as if the world itself swallowed her up. 2 weeks later, it happened again. This time the cashier was Elias Crane, a quiet guy who worked overnights because he hated crowds. He said the moment he saw her, his stomach dropped. Same blue dress, same cardigan, same cart, same silent stare. The exact groceries in the exact order. Elias tried to play it cool, scanning items, bagging them, telling himself it was just coincidence. But when he got to the frozen vegetables, he swore he felt frost seep through the plastic, colder than anything that had a right to be. When she handed over her money, Elias noticed the bills weren't just old. They were wrong, printed with dates that didn't exist, smudged faces, serial numbers that looped back on themselves. He froze, and for the first time, the woman spoke. Just 3 words, whispered so low he thought he imagined them. "You forgot me." He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't even finish the transaction. He slammed the register shut and ran to the manager's office. When they pulled the footage, once again, she was there at checkout and gone at the exit. No trace, no explanation. But this time there was something else. Just before the feed glitched, you could see the edge of her face as she turned toward the camera. And her eyes, God, her eyes, were pitch black, swallowing the light. After that, the store changed. Customers complained about cold spots in the aisles. Cashiers whispered about carts moving on their own. And once, a janitor swore he saw her reflection in the freezer glass, standing right behind him, even though the aisle was empty. Lysandra quit soon after. She told me she couldn't sleep, that every time she closed her eyes, she saw that woman at her register again, staring, waiting. Elias transferred out within a month, said he'd rather clean bathrooms than ever ring her up again. And me, I stayed. I wanted to see for myself. I wanted proof. Last week I got it. I was on register 4, dead of night, when I saw her. Same dress, same cart, same stare. My throat dried up, but I forced myself to scan each item, my hands trembling as the beep echoed through the silence. She didn't blink, didn't breathe, just watched. When I got to the last bag, I tried to look away, but her lips moved, barely. And though no sound came out, I knew what she said. "You forgot me." When I handed her the bags, I swear her fingers brushed mine, ice cold. Too long, too sharp. She pushed her cart toward the doors. I turned to the screen above the register, heart hammering, eyes locked on the camera feed. And just like before, the doors opened to nothing. The cart never passed through. She never appeared again. I don't know who she was. Maybe a woman who died shopping decades ago. Maybe something older, darker, that just wears her face. But I do know this, she comes back. Again and again. Always the same, always waiting for someone to remember. And maybe one day, she won't just vanish at the exit. Maybe one day she'll follow someone home. I haven't quit yet. But every time I walk past the abandoned carts by the doors, I check twice. Because one day, I think I'll see hers, full of cold groceries waiting, with no one pushing it. And when that day comes, I don't think I'll make it out of the store alive. If this story kept you looking over your shoulder, imagine what's waiting in the next aisle of nightmares. Subscribe now before the lights flicker out. Hit that like button if you felt the chill, and share this with someone brave enough to walk Walmart's aisles at 3 a.m. Turn on the bell too, because the next story might just be the one that follows you home.